Deep in the forests of eastern Thailand lies a village that no map records. At its temple sits a wooden figure that does not rot, does not burn, and sometimes whispers the names of the living. Locals share only one warning. If the statue calls you, do not answer. Tonight, we enter the legend of the Talking Talisman. Chapter 1. The village that no longer appears on maps. No modern map shows the village of Phra Klang anymore. Yet older men in nearby towns still whisper its name only after sunset, never before. And never twice. The road leading there is not marked by signs. It narrows into a dirt path swallowed by towering teak trees, their trunks blackened as if they had once burned but never turned to ash. The air grows heavier the deeper one travels, thick with the smell of damp soil and something faintly metallic, like rust or old blood. Somchai had not planned to return. For 10 years he lived in Bangkok, convincing himself that the memories of his childhood village were only fragments of a past best forgotten, the silent nights, the shuttered windows, the way adults stopped speaking when children entered the room. Then the call came. His mother was dead. No explanation, no illness, only a message. Come home before the moon disappears. By the time he arrived, dusk had already begun to swallow the forest. The village stood exactly as he remembered, wooden houses raised on stilts, woven walls graying with age, prayer flags faded into ghostly threads. But something was wrong. There were no dogs barking, no children playing, no cooking smoke rising from kitchens. Even the cicadas were silent. At the entrance path, an old woman sat beside a small table of incense and wilted marigolds. Her skin hung like damp cloth from her bones, and her eyes were clouded with a milky film that reflected no light. She stopped him with a trembling hand. "You came back," she whispered, as if the trees themselves might overhear. Somchai bowed politely. "I came for my mother." The woman's fingers tightened around his wrist with surprising strength. Her breath smelled of burnt herbs and decay. "Then listen carefully," she said. Her cloudy eyes lifted toward the distant silhouette of the temple roof, barely visible beyond the trees. "Whatever you do, do not look into the eyes of the statue." A sudden wind moved through the teak forest. It lasted only a second, but Somchai could swear the village exhaled with it. And somewhere far beyond the houses, something wooden struck against stone. Slow, hollow, waiting. Chapter 2. The temple where no wind enters. Wat Klang stood at the far edge of Phra Klang, where the forest pressed inward as if trying to swallow the structure whole. The temple roof curved like folded wings blackened by age, its tiles slick with moss and shadow. No prayer bells chimed, no birds nested in the rafters. Even the air seemed to refuse entry. Somchai felt it the moment he crossed the cracked stone threshold. The wind stopped. Not faded, stopped, as though an invisible wall sealed the temple grounds from the rest of the world. The teak trees behind him creaked and whispered. Yet within the courtyard there was only a dense, padded silence that pressed against his ears until his heartbeat sounded too loud, too alive. At the center of the courtyard stood a stone basin filled with rainwater gone black with decay. Dead leaves floated upon its surface, unmoving, though Somchai could feel his own breath stirring against his lips. He leaned closer and saw no reflection looking back, only a depthless darkness that seemed to absorb light itself. Inside the main hall, the smell struck him first: burnt resin, old incense, and something sour beneath it, like cloth sealed in a coffin too long. Rows of Buddha images lined the walls, their gold leaf flaking away in dull patches that resembled diseased skin. At the far end, beneath a soot-darkened beam, stood a low altar draped in cracked red cloth, and upon it rested a small statue carved from wood so black it seemed wet. It was roughly the height of a forearm. Its body was human in shape, yet wrong in proportion, the torso too thin, the ribs faintly visible beneath carved grooves, the arms twisted inward as if bound. The face was neither male nor female. The mouth stretched slightly open, not in a scream but in the memory of one. But it was the eyes that held him. They were not carved. They were hollow. Deep sockets filled with a lacquer so dark it swallowed the light around it. Somchai felt a pull behind his sternum, as if something inside him leaned toward the statue in recognition. "Do not stand too close." The voice came from the shadows. An elderly monk emerged from behind a pillar. His saffron robes faded to the color of dried blood. His skin clung to his bones, and his eyes were sunken but sharp with a fatigue older than age. Somchai stepped back. "What is it?" The monk's gaze shifted toward the statue, then quickly away. His lips moved before sound emerged, as if the words resisted being spoken. "It is not a statue," he said at last. A faint crack echoed from the wooden figure, a soft splitting sound, like timber adjusting in damp air. The monk closed his eyes. "It is what remains," he whispered, "of something that was once alive." Somchai felt the silence tighten around them. From somewhere within the temple walls came a slow, hollow knocking, wood against stone. Once, then again. And though the monk did not look back, Somchai felt certain of one thing. The sound was coming from the altar.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 3. The Dream That Leaves Mud in Your Hands. That night, the village sank into a silence so complete it felt deliberate. No insects sang. No wind brushed the stilts of the wooden houses. Even the boards beneath Somchai's feet seemed reluctant to creak. He lay on the thin mattress of his childhood room, staring at the ceiling beams he remembered from boyhood, beams his mother used to hang drying herbs from. Long before the house began to smell permanently of smoke and bitter roots. Sleep did not come naturally. It arrived like something placed over his face. Heavy, suffocating, unavoidable. He found himself standing inside the temple hall. Moonlight pooled across the floor, yet he could not see its source. The Buddha statues along the walls had turned away, their faces angled toward the shadows as if refusing to witness what stood at the altar. The wooden figure was no longer still. It sat upright, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, as though listening to something buried beneath the floorboards. Somchai tried to move, but his feet were buried ankle-deep in damp earth. Cold mud pressed between his toes, thick and alive, slowly tightening as if drawing him downward. The statue's hollow eyes glistened. A sound emerged, not from its mouth, but from within the wood itself. A wet creaking, like joints bending after decades of burial. Then came the whisper, not heard with the ears. He felt it along the inside of his ribs. "I remember warmth. I remember blood." The statue's head lifted, its empty gaze fixed upon him. Mud tightened around his legs, climbing higher, pulling him toward the altar. He tried to scream. Soil filled his mouth. The temple floor began to breathe. He woke choking. Darkness pressed against the walls of his room. His chest heaved as if he had been buried alive. For several seconds he did not move. Then he noticed the smell. Wet earth. His fingers trembled as he lifted his hands into the faint lantern light. Mud filled the creases of his palms, packed beneath his fingernails. Fresh, cold, real. From somewhere outside, deep in the sleeping village, came a single hollow knock. Wood striking stone. Somchai wiped his hands on his blanket, but the dampness remained, clinging to his skin like memory. He did not sleep again. Just before dawn, when the darkness is said to be thinnest, he heard something moving beneath the floorboards. Slow, dragging, and stopping directly beneath where he lay. Chapter 4. The Man Without a Shadow. Morning came without birdsong. A pale, diluted light seeped through the woven bamboo walls, turning the room the color of old bone. Somchai had not slept. Every sound from the night, the dragging beneath the floor, the hollow knock in the distance, clung to him like damp cloth. When he stepped outside, the village seemed to be holding its breath. Doors remained shut, windows were latched from within. Even the cooking fires had not been lit. A thin mist hovered knee-high above the ground, refusing to rise, refusing to disperse. Somchai told himself he needed air, needed movement, needed to escape the weight pressing behind his ribs. He followed the narrow dirt path toward the edge of the teak forest, where the trees grew so densely their branches braided together, sealing out the sky. He stopped when he realized he was no longer alone. A man stood ahead on the path. He wore a long, dark shirt that hung loose over his thin frame. His hair was streaked with gray. Though his face was difficult to focus on, not blurred, but somehow reluctant to be remembered. He stood perfectly still, hands at his sides, as if he had been waiting for hours or years. "Somchai," the man said quietly. The sound of his own name made Somchai's throat tighten. "Do I know you?" The man did not answer immediately. His eyes drifted past Somchai, toward the village behind him, and something like pity crossed his face. "You should not have come back before the moon disappears." The words echoed the message that had summoned him home. Somchai stepped closer. "Who are you?" The mist shifted. Somchai's gaze dropped instinctively toward the ground. The morning light lay flat across the path, illuminating pebbles, roots, and the damp footprints Somchai himself had left behind. But beneath the stranger's feet, there was nothing. No shadow stretched behind him. No darkness pooled at his heels. Only bare earth, pale and undisturbed. Cold spread across Somchai's shoulders. The man followed his gaze, then slowly lifted his eyes again. "They told you not to look into its eyes, didn't they?" he asked. Somchai felt his mouth go dry. The forest behind the stranger gave a faint shudder, leaves trembling though no wind moved. "If it speaks your name," the man continued, his voice thinning to a whisper, "you must not answer." A hollow knock echoed faintly through the trees. Once. Twice. Somchai blinked, and the man was closer. He had not heard footsteps. "Leave before the next moonless night," the stranger murmured, "or you will remain here, the way I did." The mist thickened suddenly, rising like breath from the earth. Somchai flinched and wiped moisture from his eyes. When he looked up again, the path was empty. Only the teak trees stood motionless around him. Then, slowly, he became aware of a new shape on the ground at his feet. A small indentation in the damp soil. As if something child-sized had been standing directly behind him, watching.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 5. The History Buried Beneath Ash and Bone. Somchai found the monk waiting inside the temple hall. He had not heard him enter. The old man sat cross-legged before the soot-blackened altar, fingers moving slowly over a string of prayer beads polished smooth by decades of use. Each bead clicked softly in the suffocating silence, a fragile rhythm that seemed to hold the air together. "You met someone on the forest path," the monk said without looking up. Somchai's breath stalled. "Who was he?" The monk's fingers paused. "No one who leaves," he answered. Outside, the temple courtyard remained unnaturally still. The basin water had not rippled since yesterday. A film of dark residue clung to its surface like congealed oil. Somchai's eyes drifted toward the altar. The statue had been returned. He was certain it had vanished the previous day. Now it rested upon the cracked red cloth, exactly as before, ribs carved into its narrow torso, head bowed slightly forward, hollow eyes devouring the dim light around it. Something about its posture felt expectant. "What is it made of?" Somchai asked. The monk inhaled slowly, as though drawing breath required permission. 70 years ago, he began, the village was dying. A fever had come from the lowlands. Children burned from within, skin blackened, livestock rotted where they stood. The road flooded, no one could leave. When the first mass graves were dug, the earth refused to keep the bodies. By morning, the soil pushed them back up. Somchai felt the temperature drop. The elders summoned a ritual master from the Khmer border. The monk continued. He promised to bind the sickness, to give it a body it could inhabit instead of flesh. The monk's gaze flicked toward the statue, then quickly away. It was carved from teak struck by lightning, mixed with ash from funeral pyres, ground bone from children who died before naming, and blood freely given. A faint cracking sound came from the statue's torso, like wood swelling after rain. Somchai swallowed. Did it work? The monk's prayer beads trembled in his hands. The fever stopped the next morning. Silence pressed inward. And then, Somchai whispered. The monk closed his eyes. At night, he said, people began hearing their names being called from inside their homes. The statue emitted a soft, hollow creak. Somchai felt the sound vibrate inside his ribs. The monk's voice dropped to a whisper. It absorbed the sickness. His eyes opened, filled with an exhaustion older than grief. But it also learned hunger. Outside, from somewhere beyond the temple walls, came a slow hollow knock. Wood against stone, waiting to be fed. And for the first time, Somchai realized the statue's carved mouth was no longer slightly open. It had widened, as if the memory of a scream were returning. Chapter 6. The night when something knocks like a child. Night arrived without a sunset. One moment the village lay under a dull gray sky, and the next it was submerged in darkness thick enough to feel against the skin. No lamps glowed from neighboring houses. No voices drifted through the slatted walls. Even the teak forest seemed to withdraw into itself, as if unwilling to witness what followed. Somchai barred his door before the last light vanished. The old wooden latch felt fragile in his hands. He did not remember locking doors as a child. He sat on the floor beside the thin mattress, listening. The silence deepened until it began to produce its own sound, a low pressure in the ears. Like descending underwater, his lantern flickered though the air was still. The flame bent sideways, then straightened, then bent again toward the door. Midnight came without a clock to announce it. He knew by the sudden cold. A soft knock touched the wood. Not loud, not urgent. Careful. Polite. Somchai held his breath. Another knock. Lower this time. At the height of a child's hand. His mouth went dry. "Who is it?" he forced himself to whisper. Silence. Then a small voice answered from the other side of the door. "I'm cold." The words were faint, fragile, as if carried through layers of soil. Somchai felt his chest tighten. The voice was not crying. It was patient. "I can't find my house." It continued softly. "Please open." Something brushed the door, a slow dragging sound, like damp cloth pulled across wood. His fingers crept toward the latch before he realized he was moving. He stopped. The monk's warning surfaced in his mind. "If it speaks your name, do not answer." The small voice shifted closer to the crack beneath the door. "Somchai," it whispered. His spine went rigid. The lantern flame collapsed into a thin blue thread. Outside, something exhaled. He lowered himself slowly and peered through the narrow gap near the floor. At first he saw only darkness. Then shapes emerged in the dust. Tiny handprints, pressed into the damp earth just outside the threshold. One more appeared as he watched. Then another, forming slowly, as if invisible fingers were pressing down from the other side. The voice returned, no longer fragile, no longer patient. "Let me in." The handprints stopped. Silence returned with crushing weight. Minutes passed. Perhaps an hour. Somchai did not move. Just before dawn, when exhaustion finally dragged his eyelids shut, he heard something slide away from the door. Dragging. Reluctant. As though retreating was an act against its will. When he opened the door at first light, the ground outside was dry. No footprints. No handprints. Only a faint dark smear across the wood. At the height of a child's face. And from somewhere deep beneath the village floorboards, he felt rather than heard a hollow knock. Once. Acknowledging.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 7. The morning the altar was empty. Dawn did not bring relief. A gray light seeped through Phra Klang like diluted ash, revealing a village that looked unchanged, yet felt unmistakably altered. Doors remained closed. No cooking smoke rose. The air carried the sour stillness of something waiting to be acknowledged. Somchai had not meant to return to the temple so early. Yet his feet carried him there before the sun cleared the trees. Wat Klang stood as before, roof sagging under moss, courtyard silent, basin water black and unmoving. But even before he crossed the threshold, he felt it, a hollowness in the air, as if a pressure long present had suddenly withdrawn. Inside the main hall, the monk knelt before the altar. His shoulders trembled. The cracked red cloth lay undisturbed. The statue was gone. Not fallen. Not broken. Gone. Somchai's voice emerged as a dry whisper. "Where is it?" The monk did not turn. His prayer beads hung motionless between his fingers. "It has stepped down," he said. A faint smell lingered above the altar, damp wood and something coppery beneath it. Somchai noticed shallow grooves pressed into the cloth, as though narrow limbs had rested there for decades, and only now relinquished their weight. Outside, a door creaked open. Somchai turned. Across the courtyard, a woman stood clutching her shawl tightly around her shoulders. Her eyes darted toward the temple interior, then quickly away. Others began appearing in their doorways, one by one, silent, watching without speaking. No one approached. No one asked. They already knew. The monk rose slowly, as if the act required strength he no longer possessed. "It does not leave the altar without purpose," he said. A hollow knock echoed from somewhere beyond the temple walls. Closer than before. Somchai felt the vibration in the soles of his feet. A boy began to cry in the distance, abruptly muffled, as if a hand had covered his mouth. The monk's voice lowered to a whisper. Before, it waited to be brought offerings. He looked at the empty altar, then at Somchai. Now it walks. A breeze brushed the temple doorway. The first Somchai had felt since entering the grounds. It carried a faint odor of wet earth. And beneath it, the unmistakable scent of fresh lacquer. Somchai turned toward the courtyard steps. For a fleeting instant, he thought he saw small damp impressions forming on the stone, then fading before they fully took shape. Behind him, the monk spoke again. "It has chosen someone," he said. The hollow knock sounded once more. Not distant now. Directly beneath the floor. Somchai felt it travel upward through his bones. Waiting. Listening. Remembering his name. Chapter 8. The well behind the temple. By late morning, whispers had begun moving through Phra Klang like a sickness carried on breath. A child was missing. No one spoke the girl's name aloud. In the village, names had weight. Names could be heard. Names could be taken. Somchai followed the murmured directions to the rear of Wat Klang, where the land dipped slightly and the teak trees pressed close enough to choke the light. There, half swallowed by roots and creeping moss, stood the old well. He remembered it from childhood, a place forbidden after dusk, circled by offerings of wilted jasmine and cracked clay cups. He remembered his mother pulling him away when he leaned too far over the stone lip. Now the offerings were fresh. Incense sticks still smoldered in a clay bowl, releasing thin threads of smoke that drifted downward instead of rising. The air around the well was noticeably colder. Villagers stood at a distance, forming a loose crescent that never closed. No one stepped within several paces of the stone ring. Their eyes avoided the opening, focusing instead on the ground, on the trees, on anything that did not look back. A faint sound drifted upward. Not crying. Singing. A child's voice, thin and lilting, carried through the stone throat of the well. The melody rose and fell in uneven intervals, like a lullaby remembered incorrectly. Somchai felt the sound inside his chest rather than his ears. He stepped forward. No one stopped him. The stone rim was slick beneath his palms, damp with a cold condensation that smelled faintly of rot and mineral water. He leaned forward and looked down. Darkness filled the shaft. Not shadow, darkness. Thick and depthless, swallowing the beam of his lantern before it traveled more than a few meters. The singing stopped. Silence rushed upward. Then, slowly, the surface of the water revealed itself. Black, perfectly still, reflective like lacquer. Somchai saw the circle of sky above, the outline of his own head. And another shape beside it. He froze. In the reflection, something small stood at the water's edge behind him. Its head tilted upward. Its limbs were too thin. Its torso narrow, ribbed. Somchai's breath shattered into shallow bursts. He did not turn. The reflection moved. The small figure leaned closer to the well opening, its hollow eye sockets dark pools that swallowed even the reflected light. A faint ripple crossed the water. The image vanished. For several seconds there was nothing. Then, from far below, something rose through the darkness. Not quickly. Not struggling. ascending with slow, deliberate patience. The black surface trembled. A shape formed beneath it. A narrow face. A widening mouth. When the crown of the wooden head broke the surface, no water spilled over the rim. The statue emerged dry. Its carved lips parted further, revealing a darkness too deep to be shadow. And from that unmoving mouth came the faintest whisper. I remember her. Behind Somchai, a woman collapsed, choking back a scream. The incense smoke bent sharply toward the well. Then the surface stilled. The statue was gone. Only Somchai's reflection stared back, pale, trembling. And for a fleeting instant, he was certain the reflection blinked after he did.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 9. The Voice That Knows Your Name. Somchai did not remember leaving the well. He only became aware that he was walking when he found himself back inside his childhood home. The woven walls dimming the late afternoon light into a gray, breathless gloom. The village remained unnaturally quiet, as if every door had sealed itself against the same unspoken fear. He washed his hands 3 times. The smell of wet earth remained. By evening, the air had thickened again, pressing against the lungs with a weight that made each breath deliberate. Somchai lit the lantern before darkness fully settled. He did not want to experience the moment when the last light disappeared. He sat cross-legged on the floor, listening. Nothing. Not even his own movements seemed to produce sound. Then, softly, from somewhere behind him, Somchai. His spine locked. The voice was neither loud nor whispered. It existed at a distance that did not belong to space, close enough to feel, far enough to deny. He did not turn. The monk's warning pulsed in his mind. If it speaks your name, do not answer. The lantern flame narrowed, bending toward the rear wall. Somchai, the voice repeated. This time it carried a faint texture, like breath passing through damp wood. A slow pressure gathered behind his ears. His teeth ached. The air filled with the faint odor of lacquer and something coppery beneath it. He stared at the woven wall in front of him. The bamboo strips had begun to darken. Not evenly. Darkness spread along the seams, seeping outward like moisture through cloth. The fibers swelled, then receded, leaving faint grooves in shapes that reminded him of narrow ribs. The voice spoke again, closer now. You left before she finished burning. Somchai's chest constricted. His mother's funeral pyre had been closed to him. He had arrived too late. He had been told the rites were complete. The woven wall behind him creaked. Slow. Wet. She called you. The voice continued. Smoke carried your name. You did not come. His fingernails dug into his palms. I came back, he whispered before he could stop himself. Silence collapsed inward. The lantern flame died. Darkness sealed the room. For several heartbeats there was nothing, no air, no sound, no sense of the space around him. Then, directly beside his ear, the voice answered. I know. A faint wooden click sounded behind him, like joints settling after movement. Somchai remained frozen, breath trapped in his throat. From the far corner of the room came a soft dragging sound. Then another. Something shifting its weight, learning the space. The smell of wet earth thickened until it coated the back of his tongue. After a long stretch of unmoving darkness, the lantern wick sparked weakly back to life. The room was empty. But in the dust beside him, narrow impressions marked the floor. Not footprints. Not handprints. Indented grooves. As if something ribbed had leaned close enough to listen to his breathing. Outside, deep beneath the village, a hollow knock sounded once. And this time, it was answered by a second knock. From directly beneath his home. Chapter 10. The Ashes That Never Left the Village. The monk came to Somchai's house before dawn. No footsteps announced his arrival. One moment the doorway stood empty. The next his thin silhouette filled the frame, gray light outlining the fragile angles of his body. You answered it, the monk said. Somchai did not deny it. The words he had spoken in the darkness still echoed in his chest, as if the air inside him remembered. They walked together to the temple without speaking. Mist clung low to the ground, wrapping around their ankles like cold cloth. The basin water remained black and undisturbed. No birds crossed the pale morning sky. Inside the hall, the altar cloth had been replaced. Fresh red. Too bright against the soot-dark beams above. The statue sat upon it. Waiting. Somchai stopped several steps away. Something inside him recoiled, not from fear alone, but from a recognition he could not name. The monk knelt slowly. "There is something you were never told," he said. The smell of burnt resin drifted through the hall, thick enough to taste. Somchai's throat tightened. "About my mother?" The monk closed his eyes. "When the statue began to hunger," he said, "the village learned that death alone did not satisfy it. It required offering, willingly given." The wood of the statue emitted a faint, dry crack. Somchai felt the sound along his spine. "Your mother volunteered," the monk continued, "not to die, but to remain." The words did not make sense. Somchai stepped closer despite himself. The statue's lacquered surface reflected no light, yet he could see faint irregularities beneath the dark coating, as if layers had been applied over something older, something granular. "Her body was burned according to the rites," the monk said, "but her ashes were not scattered." The air thickened. They were mixed into the binding lacquer. He whispered. Somchai's breath left him. The statue stood silent, its hollow eyes devouring the dimness around them. "She believed the spirit of a mother protects even in suffering," the monk said. "She believed her presence would quiet its hunger." A faint sound came from within the statue. Not movement. Not breath. A soft settling, like powder shifting inside sealed wood. Somchai's knees weakened. "You told me she died in Bangkok," he said hoarsely. The monk's eyes shone with something like shame. "If you had known," he answered, "you would have come back sooner." Silence pressed inward. The statue's carved mouth seemed wider than before, its dark interior absorbing the air between them. Somchai reached out before he realized he was moving. His fingers hovered inches from the lacquered surface. It smelled faintly of smoke. And beneath it, the bitter sweetness of herbs his mother used to dry in the ceiling beams. His hand trembled. The statue emitted a low, hollow knock from somewhere within its wooden torso. Somchai felt the vibration in his chest. Behind him, the temple doors creaked. Wind did not enter. Yet the incense smoke bent sharply toward the altar. The monk's voice fell to a whisper. "She has been waiting for you." The hollow knock sounded again. This time, Somchai felt it answer from inside his own ribs.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 11. The Dreams That Something Is Eating. Somchai stopped dreaming. The first night after learning the truth about his mother's ashes, sleep came swiftly, too swiftly, like a curtain dropped across his mind. There were no images, no drifting memories, no fragments of sound. Only absence. He woke before dawn with the sensation that something had been removed from him. Not taken violently. Lifted. As one might lift a bowl from a table. He sat upright, breathing slowly, searching his thoughts for the lingering residue of dreams, the scattered impressions that usually dissolve upon waking. There was nothing. The emptiness frightened him more than nightmares ever had. Outside, the village remained wrapped in its unnatural stillness. Even the teak leaves hung motionless, as though painted against the gray sky. By the second night, the silence inside his sleep deepened. He did not see darkness. He experienced nothing at all. Yet when he woke, his chest ached with a dull, interior soreness, as if he had spent the night weeping. On the third morning, he realized he could no longer remember his mother's voice. He remembered her face, her hands, the smell of bitter herbs drying overhead. But her voice, the tone that had called his name since childhood, had thinned into something distant and unreachable. Panic rose slowly, cold and precise. He went to the basin outside and splashed water over his face. The surface trembled as the droplets fell, then stilled, reflecting his features with unnatural clarity. For an instant, he thought his reflection hesitated before mirroring him. He stepped back. Inside his chest, something hollow shifted. That night, he woke to a sound. Soft. Rhythmic. Chewing. It did not come from the room. It came from within his skull. He pressed his palms against his ears. The sound remained. Slow, deliberate mastication, as though something patient were consuming fibers too fine to see. A faint taste spread across his tongue, bitter, resinous, tinged with copper. The smell of lacquer thickened the air. He did not rise. He did not speak. He lay rigid, afraid that movement might draw its attention more sharply. The chewing slowed, paused, then resumed, closer to the front of his mind, where thoughts formed and dissolved. Fragments flickered and vanished before he could grasp them. A childhood game in the dust. A song sung during rain. The rhythm of his mother's grinding stone. Each dissolved before becoming memory. Toward dawn, exhaustion pulled him into shallow unconsciousness. When he woke, he could not recall the face of the boy who once lived in the neighboring house. By midday, he struggled to remember the path leading out of the village. By evening, he noticed something else. The hollow knocking beneath the earth had grown quieter, as if something no longer needed to call from below, because it was feeding from within. That night, just before sleep took him, a faint whisper brushed the inside of his thoughts. "You are lighter now." And somewhere deep in his chest, something answered with a hollow, wooden echo. Chapter 12. The offering each generation must give. The monk sent word for Somchai at midday. No messenger arrived, no voice called his name, yet Somchai found himself walking toward the temple as if summoned by a pressure behind the sternum, a slow, insistent pull he could neither resist nor fully feel. Clouds had gathered low over Phra Klang, sealing the sky into a dull sheet of pale gray. The air smelled faintly of wet soil, though no rain had fallen. Inside Wat Klang, several elders knelt in a semicircle before the altar. Their heads were bowed, their shoulders seemed permanently curved, as if shaped by decades of apology. The statue sat upon the bright red cloth, still, listening. Somchai stopped at the threshold. No one looked at him. The monk's voice emerged, thin but steady. "You must understand why this village still stands." The elders remained motionless. Somchai's chest tightened. Because of it. The monk inclined his head slightly. Because of an agreement. A faint dry creak sounded from within the statue's torso, like wood adjusting to unseen pressure. When the sickness was bound, the monk continued. The ritual master warned that suffering cannot be destroyed, only contained. The hunger that carried the fever needed a vessel and sustenance. Somchai felt a cold clarity settling over him, as if the shape of the truth had always existed inside him, waiting to be named. "What sustenance?" he asked. The monk's eyes closed. "Presence," he said, "a life given willingly, one spirit each generation, to remain and quiet what stirs beneath." The elders' prayer beads clicked in fragile unison. Somchai's voice came out hollow. "And if no one volunteers?" Silence tightened. Beyond the temple walls, the teak forest gave a faint shudder. "The fever returns," the monk said, "but it does not come as illness anymore." The statue's hollow eye sockets seemed to deepen. "It comes as forgetting," he added. Somchai thought of his mother's voice dissolving into silence, of memories thinning like smoke, of the slow chewing inside his skull. The monk lifted his gaze. "For 70 years, someone has remained." Somchai's pulse thudded in his ears. "My mother," he whispered. The monk nodded once. "And before her," he said, "another, and before that, another still." The incense smoke bent toward the statue. Somchai felt a pressure building inside his ribs, not pain, but recognition. "When the chosen one resists," the monk said quietly, "the statue chooses." The elders' beads fell silent. Outside, a child laughed briefly, then stopped, as if the sound had been cut from the air. Somchai felt the pull in his chest tighten. "When is the next offering?" he asked. The monk did not answer immediately. A hollow knock sounded from beneath the temple floor. Once. The monk opened his eyes. "On the night when the moon disappears," he said. Somchai's breath stalled. "That is tonight." The statue emitted a faint internal click. And though it did not move, Somchai felt with terrible certainty that its attention had settled fully upon him. waiting for him to understand, waiting for him to remain.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 13. The Night It Calls in Your Mother's Voice. Night fell without transition. One moment the temple courtyard lay under a dim, breathless sky, the next, darkness sealed Phra Klang as if a lid had been lowered over the village. No moon rose, no stars pierced the blackness. Even the horizon vanished. This was the night without edges. The night the agreement was honored. Somchai returned to his house before the last light died, though he did not remember walking back. The pull inside his chest had sharpened into a steady pressure, guiding his steps, slowing his breath, arranging his movements with a patience that did not belong to him. He did not light the lantern. Darkness felt appropriate. He sat on the floor where he had slept as a child and folded his hands in his lap, listening to the vast silence press against the woven walls. Hours passed without measure. Then the air grew colder. Not gradually. Suddenly, like stepping into deep water. The smell of burnt resin drifted into the room. Underneath it lay the faint sweetness of dried herbs. His mother's herbs. Something tightened inside his throat. From the far corner of the room came a faint wooden click. A pause. Then another. Measured. Careful. As though joints long unused were testing their movement. Somchai closed his eyes. He felt rather than heard the shift in the room's weight, the subtle displacement of air when something occupies space that had been empty moments before. The smell of wet earth thickened. He heard cloth brush the floor. Then breathing. Not lungs filling. Not air moving. A dry, hollow intake, like wind passing through narrow chambers. He did not turn. Tears gathered without falling. The voice came softly from behind him. Somchai. His chest constricted. It was her voice. Not an imitation. Not a memory. The exact tone that had called him in from rainstorms, from dusk, from the forest edge when he wandered too far as a child. Every muscle in his body trembled with the urge to turn. "You came home," the voice whispered. Warmth spread through his chest, painful. Unbearable. "I waited," she said. His breath broke. Behind him, wood creaked softly, settling under unseen weight. "I was afraid you would forget the way." The words pierced him deeper than fear. Tears slid down his face soundlessly. The monk's warning drifted through his mind like something spoken in another lifetime. "If it calls, do not answer." The voice moved closer. He felt its presence near his shoulder. Felt the faint coolness where breath should have been. "My son," she whispered. Somchai's lips parted. "I." The temperature in the room dropped sharply. The smell of lacquer surged, choking the sweetness of herbs. Something inside his chest struck once against his ribs. A hollow knock. The voice did not retreat. It waited. Patient. Loving. Hungry. Behind his closed eyelids, Somchai saw not darkness, but a dim reflection. A narrow wooden face leaning toward him. Its hollow eyes deep enough to hold grief older than memory. The silence stretched, waiting for his reply. Outside, deep beneath the village, the answering knock began to rise, slow, deliberate, inevitable. And Somchai realized with terrible clarity. If he spoke, it would not be his mother who answered. Chapter 14. The Fire That Would Not Take. Before dawn, the temple bell rang. It had not rung in decades. The sound spread through Phra Klang like a crack through ice, thin, brittle, final. Doors opened. Figures emerged from the dim interiors of houses, moving without speech toward Wat Klang as though drawn by a shared gravity. Somchai walked among them, though he did not remember deciding to go. The pressure in his chest had become a steady, hollow resonance, each breath vibrating faintly against his ribs. Inside the temple hall, the statue stood upon the altar, framed by rows of trembling candle flames. The red cloth beneath it had darkened, as though moisture seeped upward from the wood. The air was thick with incense and fear. The monk stood before the altar holding a clay bowl of oil and a bundle of dried temple reeds bound with thread the color of old blood. "For 70 years, he said, his voice brittle but unwavering. We have fed the vessel and called it protection." The elders bowed their heads. "Tonight," he continued, "it has begun to feed without asking." A murmur rippled through the hall, not disagreement, but terror-given sound. Somchai's gaze remained fixed on the statue. Its narrowed torso seemed subtly expanded, as if the wood had absorbed moisture from unseen depths. The hollow eye sockets reflected no flame. The monk dipped the reeds into oil. "If the vessel breaks," he whispered, "what is bound may return." His hands trembled. "But if it is no longer contained?" He did not finish. He lit the reeds. Flame bloomed weakly at first, then steadied into a thin orange tone. The smell of burning oil spread through the hall. The monk pressed the fire to the statue's chest. Nothing happened. The flame wavered, flattened, and thinned as if starved of air. He pressed harder. The reeds crackled. The wood did not darken, did not blister, did not smoke. A dry sound emerged from inside the statue, a faint internal settling, like something shifting deeper within sealed timber. The flames guttered violently. Every candle in the hall bent toward the altar. Then, one by one, they went out. Darkness swallowed the temple. Someone gasped. A child began to sob. From the statue came a sound that did not belong to burning or wood or breath. It resembled a voice passing through hollow chambers. "You bound hunger. Who binds me now?" The words vibrated through the floorboards and into bone. The monk staggered back, clutching the empty bowl. Oil dripped onto the stone, thick and black. Somchai felt the resonance in his chest intensify, answering the voice without his consent. Wind did not enter the temple. Yet robes stirred. Ash lifted from old incense trays and hung suspended in the air. The statue's head tilted slightly, the smallest motion, yet unmistakable. The hollow sockets faced the gathered villagers, waiting, judging, remembering every offering. The monk's voice broke. "It will not burn," he whispered. Behind Somchai, someone collapsed to their knees. The darkness thickened until the temple seemed buried beneath earth and time. Then, deep below the floor, the hollow knocking began again. Slow, massive, as if something far older than the statue had shifted in its sleep. Somchai felt the answering echo within his ribs, and understood that destruction had never been the purpose, only succession.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 15. The One Who Remains. Dawn came slowly, as if reluctant to return. A dim gray light seeped through the temple doorway, revealing figures still kneeling where darkness had left them. No one spoke, no one wept. The silence was not shock. It was recognition. Somchai stood before the altar, though he did not remember stepping forward. The air felt lighter now, as if a pressure long pressing against the lungs had been released. Behind him, the monk's breathing had grown shallow. "The hunger does not leave," the old man whispered. "It only changes its keeper." Somchai's chest no longer vibrated with the hollow knocking. Instead, he felt a stillness inside his ribs, vast and echoing, like an empty chamber waiting to be filled. The statue stood motionless upon the darkened cloth. Smaller. He was certain of it. Its narrow shoulders seemed drawn inward, its carved ribs less pronounced, as though the wood had shed a layer of weight. Without fully understanding why, Somchai reached toward it. This time, no instinct warned him away. His fingers touched the lacquered surface. It was warm. Not with life. With memory. A low sound resonated through his palm, not heard, but felt, a hollow tone like wood answering wood. Behind him, the monk exhaled. A long, fragile breath. "It accepts," he murmured. The temple air shifted. Incense ash settled. For the first time since his return, Somchai could hear something beyond the temple walls. Wind moving through teak leaves. A distant bird call. The faint creak of wood expanding in morning warmth. Life resumed at the edges. The elders bowed until their foreheads touched the floor. No one spoke his name. When Somchai lifted the statue, it felt lighter than expected, yet the weight settled deep within his chest, as though he had lifted something inward rather than in his hands. The monk closed his eyes. Remain, he whispered. Somchai did not resist. Outside, the village doors opened. Smoke began to rise from cooking fires. A child's laughter drifted uncertainly through the morning air, as if testing whether joy was permitted. By midday, Ban Phra Klang appeared unchanged. By evening, the road leading toward the forest seemed less oppressive, though no one walked it. Inside the temple, the altar cloth lay empty. Somchai sat in stillness where the statue had once rested. Night fell. Wind moved freely through the hall. Yet deep within the wooden beams above, something settled into its new dwelling. Years later, travelers passing near the teak forest would speak of a small village absent from their maps. Some claimed the air grew heavy near dusk. Others insisted they heard faint knocking beneath the earth. The villagers never confirmed such stories. They only burned incense and kept the temple clean. Sometimes, children asked about the shrine. "Does the statue speak?" they whispered. Mothers pulled them gently away. "It listens," they said. Inside the dim hall, where incense smoke bent toward unseen currents, Somchai sat unmoving, breath slow, eyes reflecting no flame. Near midnight, when the wind fell silent, a faint hollow tone stirred within his chest. Not hunger, not pain, a memory of both. And in the darkness beneath the temple floor, something ancient shifted, felt the stillness above it, and slept. The village still stands. The incense still burns. And the temple remains silent. Travelers say they sometimes hear a hollow knocking beneath the earth. The villagers never explain. Because some hunger is never ended, only contained. And in the dark, something is still listening.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.